welcome to part 2. This is the Schbang in It podcast, the induction series. This is part 2 of the solutions induction. This is for all of you who are looking to join the solutions team or have joined the solutions team at Schbang. It is one of our most powerful teams. It's a great way to build your career. In this part 2, we go a lot deeper into the elements that we touched upon on part 1. We've got some amazing people from the company talking about it. And we really hope you enjoy what transpires in this. This is about nuance. This is about depth. And if you've made it and you're watching this podcast part 2 and you've seen part 1, so we're really thankful and grateful to you for taking out the time to consider Schbang and to spend your time with us to understand the way our company functions. We look forward to having you here, and we hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you. Yeah, also I think a lot of our customers now, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the communication we do also goes not just to consumers but goes across the entire value chain. So this one's our induction series. Our Schbang customers, we work with large enterprise customers who have large sales teams, who have large retailer teams, who have distributors who need to be, kind of like excited. Some clients have like thousands of doctors that they employ and, so on and so forth. So really, how do you also try to incorporate some of that into the brief, so the creative work that you're doing brings into the brief?
So I think it's also a function of understanding who the client wants this message to go out to. So it depends from brand to brand and product to product and even campaign to campaign. But I mean, a very interesting point that you just brought out was what we do with Cipla, right? With Cipla Breathe Free, it's not just patients or people who have probably had asthma-related health conditions who we're speaking to, but we're also speaking to a lot of doctors. We're speaking to people behind the scenes, chemists, people who are actually stakeholders. So in a nutshell, I feel like understanding who your stakeholders are is very important, because when it comes to communication, it's not always outward facing. It's a lot of it is also internal, and how you can make your own force, come up and speak out for you.
Yeah.
Also adding to that, it's where they are present, right? Different consumer audiences are present on different platforms. Say contractors will be present more on WhatsApp, or Facebook. Instagram will have a completely different audience set, maybe your decorators, or completely different audience set. So it depends on where they are present. Also, you can have your marketing strategies for those different platforms.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, because I'm seeing so many points that are there, and I think what a great account lead, at least in our system, what we want to encourage is somebody who then starts to connect those dots and says, look, here's the way. It's not the full answer, but here's the way, because that's a lot of information also. And that's
the account lead does work with the GSM on this. It is their responsibility, but defining the way and then working with the GSM to crystallize it, to make sure like it's going in the right direction. They're not doing it completely alone. It is a collaborative effort, but yes, the ownership does lie with them.
Yeah. And that's why we call the GSM also the brain, right? Because then you've done so much work with different briefs that you then are quickly able to like give direction to a brief. And I think it's great, this discussion also, the way the interplay is becoming very clear. So I hope it's a lot of it is clear to the people joining us also, and the people considering to join us on that.
I would like to add one more thing on briefs. I think we've spoken a lot about the briefs for the campaigns and the strategies, but the account lead is also responsible for the day-to-day briefs.
Absolutely, yeah.
And understanding very quickly how to turn around the day-to-day briefs, understanding how to reprioritize work that's happening on the brand, or getting some of the briefs done really quickly, because digital is day to day. You have to be fast. You can't take a client brief and wait for like 1 week to execute it. So their responsibility is also the quick thinking on managing delegation of work and
writing the everyday briefs well. But I think also it's a great point that you make, because the more you do deep work on the large briefs, the better your everyday briefs will be, because the large briefs are the opportunity for you to go deep. And the everyday briefs, I think, is a lot of like, but I mean, actually, I'd love to understand, we've spoken about the large brief. What makes a good everyday brief? Like what makes a good everyday creativity brief?
I think she covered it when we spoke about the strategist, right? Making sure you know the brand properly, the consumer properly,
and the competition.
Also, why the client is giving you that brief? They could probably say, I want banners for this website, but why? What's what's the reason they want to do this, and probably understanding that reason gives you more of an insight into what the client wants, and therefore give you a clearer idea of what your communication line should be, because then you know why it's going up and with what end purpose it's going up.
I think that's the main question for the everyday briefs. If
Yeah,
you
the
just-
why and the main
why.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the why. And then you know what should my banner say, what should the image be, what should the copy be. And you quite often briefs are, we need a banner updated, and the team is like, okay, let's do it. They've not understood why the client is doing it. Is it because sales has dropped? Is it because they want a quick uptake? Is it a long-term positioning? The minute you get that, your copy will be on point, the image you use will be on point, and you can turn it around in one day.
Yeah, so I think it's why also a little bit of the motivation of the consumer, which then happens through the consumer work, which is that, hey, generally this consumer seems to be a bit more like this. They enjoy this. This is the brand language, brand tone, which I think most of the teams then understand, but like just reiterating it just triggers thoughts. That could be it. And also I think a great account lead, also what they do is they put out like thought starters. So, I think the why is this happening, what is it supposed to achieve? Here's a little bit about the visuals. This is a small mood board. This is a small set of words that really appeal. And, here's some thought starters. And then just, then that's where the solution strategist takes over. That's where the creative strategist takes over to shape a really good creative product on an everyday basis for the client. And I think that interplay, how do you guys ensure that interplay between your teams,
So one positive thing about being an AL is because obviously they handle 3 or 4 businesses. They have an understanding of different categories, different teams, skill sets, and what kind of briefs are coming from their own businesses. So basically what they can do is they can channelize some of the thinking from this brief, some of the understanding from the category, some of the learnings from the team, and actually put it in another team to ensure that the seamless flow is maintained. And actually that happens in most of our teams. Like if we get a very different kind of brief, the TL knows in their team that this person is the best suitable person, and they can pull that person out of that team for some time, work on that brief, get it executed, and that person can go back to their job.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into, like the point you raised about the team management.
Correct.
And really building teams. So, that's, Krishnama, you want to talk about that?
It's not just about managing and building teams, but it's also about, I think a very important point that we sometimes forget is getting feedback. Someone had once told me feedback is a gift, and when I really, went into understanding that, it is because it gives you an understanding of what not just the client or the consumer wants, but also why they want something. And I feel like we need to keep going back, or the account lead needs to keep going back and circling into a why to get the right answers out. So I feel like, yes, and also as Rohan pointed out, cross-functional learning or learnings that pass on from one brand to another is something that a TL needs to do. They need to have applied learnings so that, things work in tandem, and you can obviously use, no 2 brands are going to be the same, no 2 campaigns are going to be exactly the same, and therefore as an account lead, you need to keep coming up with newer ways of asking similar questions or newer ways of finding out the same kind of data. And I think that's the experience that this role gives you, that enriches you and obviously makes you get prepared for being a GSM.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, and then, so we've spoken a bit about the writing of the brief. We've spoken a bit about the delegating. I think we've not spoken that much about working with other departments. So, maybe Akshay want to talk a bit more about how the account lead then starts becoming very instrumental in the system to start working with other departments.
Sure. So I think we spoke about the brief, and the brief really gives us an understanding of, what will be required to actually solve for the consumer problem. So it could be again an influencer campaign, it could be a video that may be required, might be a photo shoot, could be a media plan, could be SEO, whatever. So I think that's where the account lead really gets a holistic view of who do I need to now go to once I've understood that brief from the client, documented on a piece of paper, that now where do I go to actually piece the entire puzzle together. And that's where a lot of the interaction really comes with the other departments, right? And one is interacting and just giving like a blanket brief to the other departments, but second is actually knowing what information is important for that department to come back with something meaningful and valuable to add back to the larger brief. So I think that's where the entire interaction happens with the other teams, wherein you start opening up your mind to say, okay, fine, how can this brief be a little more tailor-made for the SEO team versus SMP versus the photography guys? Because everybody collectively will now come and put their force together to add to the overall brand business brief in a way. So I think the account lead here now starts playing the role of, dissemination, writing more specific briefs, talking to more people, and I think that's where the cross-functional learning actually really happens, where you're talking to more people from other departments and hearing their questions, hearing their requirements, and then learning by answering their questions as well, very importantly.
Yeah, and I just want to add also, like, as a solution strategist, you kind of do the follow-throughs. So the account lead kind of sets the way, and then you're doing the follow-throughs. So that enables you to then, when you come to the account lead discussion, really own the discussion and be able to kind of navigate, some of these things. So, and that's where it's...
Exactly. I think that, like, because I've been interviewing so many account leads, I've realized that many people do not have that cross-functional learning when they come to a place like Schbang. I think that's sort of built into our ethos that we want to make it slightly more integrated than what they've probably done in the past. So a lot of the learning actually happens on the job for the first time, and they're like, okay, fine, now who do I go and talk to? When we push them, say, okay, go and talk to so-and-so person, that's where they start learning more about that department. I think that's the beauty of that learning mentality, saying that, just try it, give it a shot, you learn on the job and you learn as you go along.
No, and also just want to add, on our Zoho people, we have this, right?
Yeah.
So, I think we'll have a screenshot coming into this edit where just how our org tree works really, because that's what we're trying to do to enable for people to be able to connect with the right people. So one is the academy, which is, for the people who've joined in a little later at account lead level, but may not have had the same kind of experience because other companies may not be structured the same way.
Yeah.
But, still creativity becomes so core to it, integration becomes so core to the work that we do, and hence we try to fast track that through the academy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, this whole structure that we're trying to build with the wiki and not trying to, but we built out the wiki and the Zoho people to be able to really pinpoint, say, I can talk to this one or I can talk to this one. So I think the point that you guys spoke about the ethos of curiosity, as well as the ethos of, just like kind of like trying to find the answer, kind of works together even with the account lead. But it's just a different nuance of it.
Correct. Yeah.
So if I could just add here, when I was an account lead, I had an integrated account, and I learned over each year how I need to, I'm not demand, but like how the requirement of each integrated team working with me is different. My brief to the SEO team is different from my brief to production, is different from my brief to tech. And that really comes at an account lead level when you're talking to each department, and like Akshay said, asking the right questions, because that's the thinking you take forward as a GSM. The brains and that value add that comes can only happen if you've done that at an account lead level, and understood how each different vertical has a different role to play in your larger brand strategy. It's not a copy paste, and each touch point acts very differently in the consumer journey. So that learning at an account lead level is necessary for you to then move on to a GSM level.
I think you got just to add, I think you got speak their speak, right? And because they will understand the way you speak to them, and if you use the right words, they probably understand the brief a lot better. And I think eventually becomes about how you're able to build a relationship with them, because you at the heart of where you are, you're trying to solve for the client's business problems, right? So you're
still
build
owning the brand,
exactly,
right?
and some of the buck is stopping at the account lead in a way. So you've got to build your rapport with the teams to make sure that you're getting your things on time, so that things can be delivered to the client on time, and the client's overall happy, because a happy client delivers happier brands and happier campaigns.
So the account lead actually, yes, you are still brand custodian, but all the departments are like feeding it to you, and then you are taking it to the client. So you're becoming a custodian of integrated work as well. And what I would like to actually add here is the responsibility of the brand is as important as a strategist, as it is at a TL, as it is as a GSM, because the roles you are playing are different on the brand. So the everyday hygiene, brief understanding, everyday creativity, the complete brand understanding of tone, how it looks, what it will do, the influencers it works with, comes at the strategist level. The account lead works at a more integrated level to get the other departments in, and you become a brand custodian for all of them, where you say where the buck stops. And then the GSM comes in with the thinking. So that's kind of how it's split. But it's equal. It's not that the strategist is not is less responsible. In fact, the strategist is the most important part in the entire team, because if everyday work is not like hitting the mark and is not like surpassing the mark, then the TL and GSM's value add is not going to be there.
Yeah. No, and I feel also the account lead has a role in everyday creativity in just trying to like really shaping the everyday brief. So, that kind of like that interplay between them, and then, kind of like grooming stuff, grooming teams. I think we'll go to the grooming teams part with the GSM role as well. So, we've spoken a lot about the account lead. I think the two big things we've taken out is this, this idea of getting the brief right, getting the consumer understanding right, and kind of getting more from the client by giving more to the client. So that, and then kind of this idea of integration. So that really sums up the idea of the bridge. There's a bridge with the client, a bridge with the rest of the company, a bridge with the person above you, which is the GSM, and the solution strategist who's working with you on the everyday creativity stuff. So that's the account lead part. And I think as we kind of nuance and differentiate the role between the GSM and the account lead, the reason we call them the brain also is because they're responsible for all of the stuff that we've spoken about so far, which is the everyday creativity, which is getting the briefs right, which is knowing the consumer, which is knowing the client, which is maintaining a relationship with the client. So it's more responsibility that comes in across more brands, and that's why you are the brain. But there's also two critical parts, right? There's the team building, and then there's the business targets. That's how we've kind of looked at the GSM kind of becomes so critical to the way we govern business at Schbang. And I think, we've had a little bit of criticism of being very revenue oriented, but I think, I don't have any bones about that, because we're trying to build a globally successful business, and for that we need the right kind of revenue at the right kind of energy to come into this business. So let's talk a bit about both those parts. One, let's talk about team, and let's talk about how the GSM has a role with respect to managing teams, because I think, actually, if you're a GSM and you watched just this segment, it may not make sense for you, because you've got to watch all the other stuff, because that is so critical to the role as a GSM. But this is really just deep diving into the GSM role. The parts which are not spoken about here. This is the parts not spoken about. Everything we've spoken about is for the GSM. So again, maybe Akshay, if I can come to you about the GSM and how these two things, we just as we try to round this up more in team building and in revenue orientation for the GSM.
So I think typically, again, a GSM will probably come with about 5 to 6 years of experience in the industry. Again, having worked across a plethora of industries, categories, brands overall. So usually the GSM comes with a lot of leadership skills already inbuilt within them, or probably if they've already grown within the Schbang system, they probably worked with, or at least managing 15, 20, 30 people. Some GSM also have about 45 people working under them in different functions, of course, altogether. But from that perspective, a lot of their role is in the overall leadership and the grooming of the larger teams, identifying the need gaps, of course, of the clients, but also of the teams internally, looking at, the hiring requirements, looking at the promotions, looking at the grooming requirements, looking at what's really needing the training exactly, to see how can I grow more people within my team, because that's a personal growth for myself as well, and I can move up the ladder, the more people under me also grow, right? So a lot of the identification of the overall team sort of comes from the GSM. Of course, one part of it becomes the entire business and the targets. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the core versus the integrated numbers, and how those sort of targets are sort of built into the overall job description of the GSM. But I would say, like, what differentiates the account lead from the GSM is the scale at which the GSM is operating. Now they probably might have about 2 account leads working under them. In some cases, even 3 account leads. So typically it's almost 12 to 15 brands under one GSM. They're sort of working as like a separate strategic business unit, like an SBU in a way, wherein that entire P&L is run by them for their entire team. And like a lot of the percolation of the targets go from them, a lot of the hiring sort of comes from them, the grooming happens right from them. And that's, I think, one of the key differentiators. Of course, they are talking to the client at a slightly more elevated conversation. So they're talking primarily business to the client. They're talking about insights, they're talking about categories, they're talking about trends in the industry potential. The client is coming to them for a lot of the bouncing off of their ideas as well, saying, do you think this might work for my brand or not? So a lot of the elevated conversations are actually happening at the GSM level. and typically the buck stops at the GSM in many cases, in case of escalations that might come from the clients end. And I think just having a complete view of all the brands, of course, it takes a lot of time and effort to get into each brand individually, but having like a top line view of each brand and knowing what direction the brands are moving towards and giving the team the direction, or at least like a blueprint, say, okay, fine, let's course correct here to move the brand in this direction, sort of comes from the GSM, which also comes from the conversations they're having with their brands. And for that, we have monthly catch-ups, right? We've put a system wherein we do monthly catch-ups with the brand teams themselves. So a lot of the top level conversations are actually happening with the client. From those conversations, the direction is set by the GSM down to the account lead and the strategist.
Yeah, and also the experience of all these years, and that's why at your base is the everyday creativity. You know the consumer, you know the brief, and now you've reached a place where you can quickly course correct stuff.
Yeah, I think at GSM is something, I think sometimes these things come more intuitively as compared to having to spend too much time thinking. I think now it's more instinct, it's more about intuition that okay, this will work, this might not work, this consumer insight probably does not work for the brand potentially. So I think at this level it's a lot of like intuition, a lot of gut which sort of comes into play here as well.
And really moving also quickly with gut with respect to, a lot of the reality is a lot about preempting the fires and ensuring that the fires don't happen in the first place, because then working with your teams to ensure that that whatever is the goal, that they are moving in that particular direction. So that's cool.
It's almost like playing the role of a captain of a ship, right? It's almost like this is
I
my
love that.
crew, and this is what we need to do, this is where we need to go, and kind of making sure that we're all moving in the right direction, right? Course correcting.
Yeah, actually that's a great point that you put, because I know that we get and another reality in this business is attrition. And I think I just want to put that the way we're trying to build a structure at Schbang for anybody who's joining us is that at least the way we're trying to build a structure is that if you start as a solution strategist, at least go all the way up till GSM. We'd love for you to continue growing this company with us. And then there's levels beyond that which we probably speak about in another podcast, but and as we build out businesses and as we have business heads and units and vice presidents and all of that, but I think the way you said it so well about the captain of the ship, at least I think that's one point to leave across with people joining us as solution strategists, because you get such a well-rounded, you get the creativity, you get the understanding of the consumer, you get leadership, you get the ability to work with multiple teams, and what you've gotten out with is that richness. The reality of the marketplace is that, because I think, and maybe some people will say in the comments that we are trying to be a little too cocky, but we do invest a lot of effort in training our people. And the reality is that we're seeing that people across Schbang, at junior levels are getting probably the kind of raises that we are not able to afford at a yearly raise. I think, at the end of the day, I think still Schbang in terms of percentage wise, we give great raises at different levels. But I think just the idea that even if you do want to look at this as a temporary ship, we don't want to look at people like that, but we hope that people don't look at it as a temporary ship, but even if that is the reality for some people, at least go all the way up till GSM, because that gives you complete well-rounded and you become like super strong with it, right?
On the contrary, I feel like with a company as young as Schbang, I wouldn't say a 6-year-old company, I would say it's a 6-year young company, and one of the benefits of joining a 6-year young company is that you get to grow with the company. And even if you've joined at the junior most position, your chances of growing are that much faster and higher than if you were probably sitting with an established corporate, for example. So the learning is much more, because we as a company are learning as we're growing. The opportunity to even see what you are planning come through to life is a lot higher, because a lot of the juniors come to us and say, in their interviews, that I'm leaving this job because my ideas couldn't come to life. I think that's the beauty of Schbang. We give people the opportunity to bring your thoughts to life, and with this whole everyday creativity aspect, I feel like that is one thing that we definitely see happening on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, amazing.
And we have people who actually have stayed in this organization a lot longer than other places, I would say. In fact, we credit to that. But
I think most, I don't know the percentage, but most of our GSMs have grown within the system because they've been through those levels, and when they're at GSM, like you said, they are responsible for everything that the strategist and account lead does, because they've done that and they have an understanding of that and they can direct them. but then they also now are a manager. They're
Yeah.
responsible for their team. You had once said it's your team, manage it the best way you can. Whatever processes you want to put in place, whatever systems you want to develop, whatever trackers, whatever it is, do it. Manage your team the best way you can. There's no prescribed way of managing teams also within GSMs. Everyone has their own style.
I mean, that is the unique nature
Yeah.
of being a captain of the ship.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, and of course, I mean, just want to add here for the GSMs that may be joining at the GSM level is that while we're saying make your systems, we also have already a lot of systems.
They've been
So you
built
can
over the
customize
years,
your
yeah.
systems to your needs, and you can customize your culture to the company culture. We got the manager's manifesto, which is the ethos of how to be a great manager, and then translating from that. So I think that is a whole different ballgame altogether. But I think the framework of what we've discussed in this discussion, maybe at a GSM level, probably you're working with guys like you guys to understand the business
Yeah.
orientation,
Yeah.
to understand P&L. Grooming teams is a function. Akshay, as you said, you probably got an instinct for that. That's why we've kind of let you into the system. Your work speaks for itself, and you can drive through that. So I think we've kind of set the frame for that. But a lot of the work on the GSM level, if you're listening to this as a GSM, a lot of the work actually comes once you come in. But at least I want to thank all of you for putting so much detail into how this interplay at Schbang works between the three levels that we've got within the solutions department, and I think that's a great start to this induction series that we're doing. So thanks a lot for
Just one thing I want to add on the GSM level. Single line brief to my GSM is that this is your agency. The
Yeah.
business you are handling is your small agency. You manage it the way you want. You have your targets, you have your businesses, you have your teams. So if you have that alignment set in their mind that this is my agency, this is the way I'm handling my business, I think a lot of things comes to life from
Yeah.
that perspective.
it's my
once that-
business. Yeah.
And also
just
the
to
ownership of the team is with you.
Exactly.
I let you take the calls on how you want to structure it, on who you want to put on what brand. That's, like you said, a small agency within the agency.
Yeah.
It
itself.
automatically invokes this sense of responsibility and the feeling of empowerment that
Yeah.
this is what I need to handle, and you've been given that freedom to run it the way you need to, which is again another beauty of Schbang.
Yeah. Nikita, you final
Yeah,
words
just
from
just
you.
the fact that you get a business understanding. Many people that I've interviewed for a GSM position, when I ask them, have you managed targets or do you know how your agency's business functions, most of the times I get a no. So that is something that you learn here, and as Rohan really nicely put it, it's your own agency, and the freedom that you get to kind of govern that agency of yours with the right people and to drive the right communication for your brands, right? I think that's something that Schbang as an agency really
And it's a lot
strives
then
for.
our jobs to make their business much more
Exactly.
effective. So we kind of give the superchargers with the academy, with the wiki, with all of the
Yeah.
other systems that we've got. So I hope people see this and they want to build their career with Schbang, especially in solutions. So and I mean as a final word, I think the great part about this business is probably 1.5 years down the line this all changes, or rather not changes but evolves. So looking forward to where that goes. But for now, thank you so much for all your time and all your brains and your effort and energy in putting all this. And if you watched this till the end, then we're so grateful to you that you've taken the time out to spend time with us on whatever you're doing, whether it's driving your car or running or just really glued to the screen. Thank you, and we hope to see you at Schbang. And if you're at Schbang, then a big warm welcome from all of us.